Met Studio is one of the world's leading experiential design agencies. Here we talk to its design director, Peter Karn. As experiential designers, how do you describe your work?
Well, it's quite a hard thing to define a lot of the time because we're not necessarily architects, we're not necessarily interior designers. We're quite content driven in what we do. So I think we always start with the content on a project. So we start with the subject and what is the essence of a subject, and then try and map that story into a space or into an exhibit or into a building or into a physical entity. I'd probably describe us that we're kind of spatial storytellers or experiential storytellers, I would say.
What are the typical creative and technical challenges you meet going from concept through to design?
Well, yeah, I mean, where to start, really? Well, creatively, I think it's just the diversity of the subjects that we deal with. Because 1 week we're dealing with an exhibition on something like biology or the brain, and then we'd be doing another one on the universe, another one on history. So it's trying to actually adapt to the different subjects. Because what you can't do is take one formula and apply it to all of them. You actually have to start from scratch every single time. So I think creatively that is always a challenge, but I think it's also an inspiration, because it means that if you do start with the content in every job, you end up with a unique solution every single time rather than a generic piece of work. And I think technically it's the same thing. It's trying not to rely on the same old tricks on every single job, and it's trying to not be a slave to technology and not be a slave to trickery and techniques, but it's using the right technology for the right purpose, I think. And obviously budget constraints are always an issue on projects. Even if you've got a huge budget, it's how do you allocate that budget, how do you get value for money? And I think also it's trying to draw the link between a great concept and a great product is also a challenge, in that how do you keep the essence of your concept when pragmatism and budgets and deadlines and approval processes come into play, that you don't lose the essence of your concept. So, because we always try and keep our concepts quite simple and quite iconic, but they can be a tendency that they can get overcomplicated as the project progresses. So it's keeping that simplicity, I think, is always a challenge.
You're currently involved in the refurbishment of the Institution of Engineering and Technology's building. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really exciting project, actually, and quite a unique project, because again, it's hard to define. It's not an exhibition. It's not a piece of interior design. It's more giving the space an identity and trying to promote the IET's brand, but also trying to create something iconic for the members. So that's kind of what we started with, was how can we reflect the members of this institution, rather than just create big expensive things within the interior that are there to impress visitors to the building. It's how can we actually reflect the culture of the members. So what we're trying to do is create a series of installations that embody the spirit of the IET, but also tell the story of the architecture, the big idea behind the architecture. So what we want to do is create a series of iconic moments. For example, we have a large entrance sculpture, digital entrance sculpture in the lobby that responds to visitors' movements below it, and it's all about the coming together of the different disciplines of the IET. But then as you move up through the building, we have various installations. One is 100 engineering ideas that have changed the world, but chosen by the actual members themselves. So there's a certain sense of inclusivity from the members, in that what we're doing reflects them and their thoughts and their ideas, and showcases the importance of engineering. But then we have things in their members' floor which are fairly practical. So they're displays or artful displays that showcase different events that are coming up, various timetables, various comment feeds. So there's a use to it, there's a practical use to it, rather than just adding showy theatrical elements to the space that don't add any value. So it's about reflecting the brand and the importance of engineering, but also reflecting the culture of the members. Effectively adding value to the building, and it not just being a nice piece of interior design, that it has another layer to it. So that was mainly our brief, really, was to add value to the institution.
I assume your work involves a fair amount of large format output. Is it instrumental in helping you realise your creative vision?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, it depends on the project, really. And I think with any technical medium that you use, because sometimes we think, do you know what, we're not going to have any technology in a project, and we're just going to use imagery, or we're just going to use a sculptural form. And I think it's the same with large format printing. We did a job a few years ago for Saudi Aramco in Dhahran in Saudi Arabia, and they had a large horseshoe-shaped atrium space, huge. It was about a 200-meter long glass window. So one idea we had was to actually tell the entire story of the company as a stained glass window across the glass. So obviously we couldn't replace the glass, so we printed on translucent film, bomb-proof film, and applied it to the glass. And what happened then is that the light came through and filled the space with colour, but through the story of the company. So in that respect, it was like doing an audio-visual show. It had that impact. It was an immersive thing that didn't need text, that didn't need exhibits or interaction. It was just a large-scale installation that was quite moving and awe-inspiring in that respect. So large format printing, I think, still gives you the ability to do that. And it's an ability to get a large, bold message across to a large audience, which we kind of like.
You combine print with new technologies such as augmented reality. Can you give us an example of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're looking at more and more in a lot of the jobs we're doing. We did a pavilion for EDF at the Olympic Park for the 2012 Games. And obviously, a company like EDF have a large story to tell, and it was quite a small pavilion. So the challenge was, how do we get a lot of content into a small space when effectively people aren't there to visit this pavilion, they're there to view the Olympics. This is something that they might do in 10 minutes because they've got some time to kill before they go and see the 100-meter final. You know, it's not a priority to them. So we thought, well, how can we make it engaging? We need sort of magic tricks. People aren't going to read lots of graphic panels. They're not going to want to look at lots of video screens and things like that. So we actually developed a smartphone application, or augmented reality smartphone application, and then had a series of bold, iconic graphics throughout the entire pavilion. So that once people have downloaded this application, they can hold their phone up to the graphic, and then through the camera in their phone, the graphic triggers a piece of interaction or a piece of audiovisual on their phone. So it was effectively a way of creating a smart exhibition or a smart graphical installation within the pavilion. And this idea really excited us because it was the first time we'd used this technology. So we're now looking at actually taking it a step further and creating entirely augmented reality exhibitions where you have a very, very simple physical entity that is just a graphical installation. It could literally be a large format graphic on a wall or a series of graphic totems, but then all of the content is in the application. So you have image triggers that unlock the content. And this allows you to do traveling elements that you could put into shopping malls, into temporary spaces in museums, in schools, in classrooms. But the exhibition is digitally in the palm of your hand, but the graphic unlocks the exhibition. So it's a really nice way of combining the digital AV side and the graphical side, which was quite an exciting idea. And it's cheaper as well, which always pleases our clients.
Do you see more integration and overlapping of media in the future?
I think so, yeah. I think integration is the key word. I mean, that's kind of what technology is doing now, and I think it's what we try and do with a lot of our work, is rather than have, you know, a sort of cellular arrangement, if that makes sense, where you have an exhibit and then you tick the box on that and you go into another one, you get another exhibit. We like to create environments that integrate everything into a single entity or a single environment. So rather than have an empty space with 10 individual exhibits in it, you have a single space where you have stories and subjects and technologies and displays integrated within that environment. So you might sit down in that environment and touch something and then something will appear. Or you might walk up to a wall which will respond to you, or things like this. So integration is very much the key, and I think that works on a technical level as well, and you have mixed media installations. So you can have a 3D form that you can then add graphics to, that you can then add objects to, that you can then add audiovisual to. So all of the different mixed media form a single piece, I think, which is much more interesting, I think, than when they're disparate or than when they're separated. And integrating these techniques in innovative ways, I think, is what creates the kind of magic wow factor that we're all looking for.
So this must make it quite an exciting time to be a designer.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think probably more exciting than ever because there's so many tools at your disposal, which is fantastic because it used to be that you were very limited in what you could actually achieve, what you could physically build, what you could actually, how you could allow people to interact. Whereas now it's any idea you can come up with, provided you've got the budget, you can achieve it, you know. I think it's also a bit of a double-edged sword as well, because you need to be careful not to become reliant on all of these techniques. When the technique and the technology becomes the essence of what you're doing and you actually miss the point of it. But I think in terms of the possibilities, now things are better than they've ever been. Yeah, anything's possible given the technologies that we have now. If you can imagine it, you can build it, I think, seems to be the way of things now.
Do you think print's future as a standalone medium is assured, though?
I think there's always going to be a need for print, always, because with graphics and audiovisual and animation and things like that, there's always a bespokeness to these things, and there's always an expense to them. And I think sometimes people do get a bit sick of looking at screens. But having said that, things are becoming much more digital, and I think there's a big crossover between print and digital media. And the integration of those two things, I think, is the future. But there's also print, I think, is evolving as well. I mean, now you have 3D printing. So print's no longer seen as a 2D media. And I think print is also overlapping with other technologies that they can actually complement each other. So I think it's a good question. And I think that the integration of print with other medias, 3D and 2D and digital, I think, is probably the future, the way things are moving.
Typically, who would you collaborate with on one of your commissions?
Well, I mean, again, it depends on the project. So a lot of the time, content-wise, we'll collaborate with content experts who are experts in their field, which obviously vary depending on the project. And sometimes it might be a museum gallery, so that would mean that we would collaborate with content people, but with potentially artists and filmmakers and graphic designers and graphic printers and people that do environmental elements that can be applied to a space. But then on some of our other projects that are much more grander in scale, for example, architectural master plans, we will collaborate with architects, with planners, people that write business plans, do feasibility studies on a much grander scale. So I think it really depends on the subject and the scope of the project.
At what stage would you bring the printer into the process?
It depends on the job. I mean, if we're doing something that is very, very bespoke, we would like to get a bit of consultancy during the creative stage of the project, if that's available. I think more often than not, the printer is someone that comes in during the fabrication stage, because you kind of come up with the idea and then you need someone to execute that idea. If you're just doing a standard large format print that isn't particularly daring, or daring is probably the wrong word, or particularly bespoke in its, the only thing that's bespoke is the media that's printed, you would involve them during the fabrication. But if we're doing something much more integrated, for example, the Saudi stained glass window, we would like to involve them in the creative process, because the technique, it actually affects the outcome or affects the effect that we can create. So if we can bounce ideas off the technical people to say, well, we need to make sure that light comes into the space. So does that limit the mediums that we can use, or can we do this? So, you know, rather than us dictating to them what they need to be doing, we would like to ask them questions about what's possible. And then actually the creative idea can be born from that in certain things. I think that's the way we would prefer to work, but it's not always possible.
How good are printers at telling you about new developments, new substrates, new technologies that you might be able to use in your work?
Again, it's a tricky one, because none of us want to do any work for free, but unfortunately I think in the business we're in we have to. I mean, us as a business, we have to pitch for pretty much all of our projects, which means doing work for no money in the hope that you get the project. But I think there seems to be quite a lot of, amongst a lot of fabricators or specialists, because they have to produce something physical, obviously it costs them money. So a lot of them can be quite reluctant help us out with samples at the early stages of a project, unless they know that they're going to get a deal at the end of it. So it can be quite challenging, I think, to work that way, because it basically means them doing work for free in the hope that they get work at the end of it. But I would say that we have to do it on every project that we do. So it would be nice to have a relationship more like that with people in that industry, I would say.
Do you see your portfolio of work changing at all over the coming years?
I think our approach to projects remains the same, because I think it's, like I said, we don't really design to a formula. It's more about innovation. It's more about creating intelligent spaces that tell stories. I think the clients that we're working with are evolving. I think we'll always have the museum portfolio of clients, because that's our bread and butter. That's a large part of our expertise. But I think we tend to be working now with more the commercial clients, more the large brands who are wanting an experiential element to their offer. And a lot of them are wanting physical presences, aligning with events like the EDF with the Olympics, or expos and things like that. They're wanting experiential environments that connect to audiences, because as well as social media links, it creates a buzz at a place or aligned with an event that people can actually physically experience, that they can touch, that they can interact with. So that seems to be becoming a larger area of our work. But the principles, I think, remain the same, but maybe in different sectors.